As we get close to landing the plane in this series, I'd like to suggest that the greatest joys that you will ever experience on this tiny window of time on this planet will be in some relationship. And I'm going to suggest that the greatest sorrows and the greatest pain that you will ever experience will have to do with a relationship. And I don't care how much money you could ever make. I don't care how famous you could ever get. I don't care what you could own, how many people would know your name. Whatever is in your mind that would be the pinnacle of success. Whether you could marry the right person, have untold wealth, go public, all your kids fulfill all your dreams. Here's what I can tell you. If you don't have deep, loving relationships with the people that matter most, your life will be a tragedy. And the challenge is that there's all kind of things that pull every single day. And it's in the air, it's in the water, that pull you away from all the things it takes to have great, deep, loving relationships. It's Father's Day. I want to take you on a little journey. If you don't mind, you can close your eyes, but I want to take you to a park. In my mind's eye, I want you to imagine there's a beautiful park. It's one of those days where the white puffy clouds are kind of moving rather briskly in the background. As the camera zooms in, there's a little 8-9-year-old girl with pigtails. She's got some freckles across her nose. There's children in the playground that are playing, but it's kind of white noise, and the focus is on this park bench with this little 8 or 9-year-old girl, and there's a man that, as you observe this, it's obvious that he's the father. He seems very nervous. He keeps flipping his keys back and forth. They're having a little chit-chat. And then as it happens, the camera begins to zoom in, and you get to eavesdrop on a conversation. He's nervous, and he's trying to get out a message that he's rehearsed multiple times. And just before he can kind of break the ice, this cute little girl that's the apple of his heart, that is his daughter, looks up to him and says, "Daddy, when are you to come back home and live with me and Mommy? I miss you so much." And the little rehearsed speech that he has melts into oblivion. And he holds back the tears. And he looks her in the eye and he says, "Well, sweetheart, that's why we came to the park. It's why I picked you up. I'm not going to be coming home. It's not you. I want you to know I love you and Mommy loves you. It's not you at all. But you just can't understand now, but your Mommy and I just don't get along. We've tried really hard. I love her, she loves me, but I'm sure in your bedroom you've heard us argue. We yell at one another. We can't agree on things. We used to love each other so much, but we've just drifted apart. And so now, honey, there's a couple months in the summer you're going to get to be with me, and you'll understand someday. You really will. And I love you so much. But Daddy's not going to come home." I would suggest that little girl will remember that moment on that park bench the rest of her life. And if the research is correct, and I think it is, she won't understand when she's 18. She probably won't understand when she's 28 or 48 or even 68. And that will mark how she views men. That will mark her self-identity. That will mark her adult life as she waits for the other shoe to drop in every relationship about love. And for some of you, you were that little girl or that little boy. For others, you gave that speech. And the fact is that couple loved each other. That couple was Christians. They loved God. They loved their little girl. They loved each other. Why is it that we fight with people that we really love? And it's not reserved for marriage, is it? I've seen pillar Christian families who seem to be the ideal for all of us. And I've watched the matriarch or the patriarch die, and there be a big swath of money. And I've watched people who seem to really love God and really love each other attack each other in ways that have astounded me over money. I've seen brothers and sisters over menial, minuscule, crazy issues have such anger that they live in the same city, they don't talk, they don't visit. There's a schism. I've met people that have been in a small group for 5 to 7 to 10 years with other Christians. They have loved each other, some gone on vacations with one another, and someone said something about someone that became to this, and it grew and it grew and it grew, and they hate each other. I've seen whole churches literally divide over crazy things. Why do we fight with those that we love? Why do we do that? Remember the story a few years ago as a grown man and his father were watching a football game, and in between the half times there was a debate about a quarterback and whether he should be able to renegotiate his contract before it was up. And they got in such a heated debate, one of them ended up shooting the other. I could give you 4 or 5 examples in the last 10 to 12 years in church context, people who love God, who in a moment of anger and violence have walked in and either shot the pastor or shot leaders in the church. Murder among believers, violence among believers. Why do we fight with those we love? See, I think it would be unwise to talk about the 4 kinds of love, to talk about the barriers of love, to talk about communication, to have Kurt Perry come and help us understand what it looks like with clothes on, to have John come and say, you know, that social media stuff that kind of pulls us apart, and then to talk about how to find the right person and keep love alive without just pausing to say, there's a lot of forces that cause us to fight. What are they? What's the consequences? And what's the cure? James chapter 4, if you have your Bible, you can open it. I've put most of the passage in your notes, or open your phone or iPad, whatever you use. And what you're going to see in James chapter 4, this is the very first book of the New Testament written. It's written by Jesus' half-brother. He grows up with Jesus. He was an unbeliever. He comes to Christ. The church is exploding, and the very first letter or epistle to the church, these converted Jews living in a hostile environment, he writes to them about how to live this new life. And it's interesting, by chapter 4, he's talking not in theory, but there's a lot of quarrels and fights and wars going on inside the early church. And so he writes in verse 1 of chapter 4, what causes wars and what causes fighting among you? These quarrels and fights. The word for wars here is protracted states of hostility. The word for fighting is specific outbursts of anger and violence. Don't they come from your evil desires at war within you? Circle evil desires. Above evil desires, write the word hedonism. That's where we get this word. You want or you lust what you don't have, so you scheme and you literally kill to get it. You're jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and wage war to take it away from them. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. And even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong, because you only want to get it for your own pleasure. The very top of your notes, he's going to answer the question, why do we fight with those we love? And the answer is penetratingly simple and very painful. The root cause of our quarrels and our fights with one another is self-gratification. The root cause. I mean, it's that simple. I want my way, you want your way. The older we get, the more sophisticated we are. In fact, what he's going to say is that it's hedonism. It's a belief system that if you could have its pleasure at its highest, you getting what you want, me getting what I want, becomes the most important thing, and when other people or circumstances or anything could threaten how you feel and what you want, we fight. In fact, notice at the bottom of your notes, I put our problem is our inner passion that craves our own way. It's the belief that pleasure, fun, sensual fulfillment must be achieved at all cost. If you wanted a simple 2 words to put in there under our problem, just put selfish pride. And we all have it. The symptoms from verse 2 are conflict, broken relationships. When we don't get our way, we get frustrated. I call it the 1 cookie and 2 two-year-old syndrome. Right? In fact, it could be 2 cookies and 2 two-year-olds. What will happen? And it's not like you have to send them to a class, right? Now, when this cookie's there, what I want you to do is want all of it and not give any to the other person, right? From birth, the scripture says the heart is deceitful above all else, desperately sick. Who can know it? There's something in our human hearts that want our way. In fact, I have a little 11-second video to show you an illustration. These children were just taken at random from some beautiful grandparents. I'm not sure who. Watch this. Now, aren't they cute? Right? The little girl's name is Kayla. The little boy is Noah. Noah is not quite 3 years old. Kayla's about 18 months. I had the privilege with my wife of having them for 2.5 days. So we were told by some of you that you have to take little kids to Bass Pro Shop. If you haven't been there, there's this huge aquarium with the fish. You walk around and there's stuffed buffaloes and stuffed goats, and it's an experience. And so we're going around, and so my wife's theory on every event is you need a little memento. And so on the way out, at our house, behind our house, we have squirrels everywhere, and we back up next to Quicksilver, and so coyotes, the kids have seen those. So she says, here's what we're gonna do. We'll get a coyote and a squirrel for Noah and for Kayla, so they'll remember this wonderful time. So Noah being the oldest, Noah, would you like a squirrel or a coyote? He says, I want the squirrel. Good, here you go, Kayla. The moment it's in Kayla's hands, he goes, no, I want the coyote. Okay, here you go. The moment she has the squirrel, no, I want the squirrel now. No, I want the coyote now. And then finally, in a moment of great honesty, he grabs them and says, I want them both. Now, you know what? When they're 2 years old, it's really funny. Here's the deal. That Noah moment's in your heart and in mine. And it's the problem in your marriage. It's the problem with your boyfriend. It's the problem with your kids. It's the problem with your coworkers. It's the problem with fellow Christians. At the end of the day, you get slick like I am, and we're sophisticated, and we can mask it a dozen different ways. But in your heart, in my heart, we believe that pleasure and getting what we want is the what we really gonna have. And it's my selfishness and your selfishness that is at the core of every relational conflict. Notice, as we would go on, the strategy here is to attempt to fulfill our desires apart from God. Did you notice what it says? He says, you don't have because you don't ask. I don't need God. I need a great education. I don't need God. I need money. I don't need God. I need a great body. I don't need God. I need great sex. I don't need God. I need a big house. In fact, I need another house. I need a remodeled house. I don't need God. I need a hot car. I don't need God. These little tiny earrings need to be bigger ones that have bigger diamonds in them. I don't need God. I need. And all those drives do damage to your relationships because you can't run after all that stuff and have the kind of selfless, loving, loyal, deep, intimate relationships that you want with a brother or a sister, with a mom, with a dad, with a boyfriend or girlfriend, or a husband and a wife. It's attempts to fulfill your life apart from God. Doesn't mean you don't go to church. It's like, oh yeah, that's a little slice. Oh yeah, I come to church, God. I believe in Jesus. I check the box. But how I actually live and what I think is going to deliver real happiness, there's a whole system out there. I need to look like that. I need to have that. I need to own that. It's what hedonism is. The second way for the more religious is he says, not only do you attempt to fulfill your desires apart from God, you try to use God to fulfill your desires. So, you pray, Jesus, make me happy. Jesus, give me a great body. Jesus, make me a great mate. Jesus, make all my kids turn out. Jesus, help me get them in Stanford, Yale, or an Ivy League school. Jesus, would you please take away all the pain, all the health issues, all the problems? Jesus, will you give me upward mobility? Jesus, I want to go public. Jesus, And so Jesus is like this little self-help genie, and God is a cosmic vending machine, and the whole goal of Jesus is to make my world and your world what we want it to be. And in the name of Jesus, we subtly become God, and God becomes our errand boy. It's called the prosperity gospel. It really sells on TV. Just there's a formula, A1, like the machines, A1, B4, C34. Read the Bible a little bit, give a little bit of money. Usually they want you to give them the money, and they'll talk about how it'll multiply back to you as they go off in their jet. At the heart of why we fight with one another, the problem's not out there. The problem isn't the person. The problem isn't the circumstances. The problem isn't my mate. The problem isn't my boyfriend. The problem isn't my sister. The problem isn't Hollywood. The problem isn't education. At the heart of why I fight and you fight is the root is my own selfish pride. I want my way. And when you're little, now. Well, look at the consequences. Turn the page as James doesn't leave us with simply diagnosing what the issue is. He then moves and says, okay, this is what these quarrels, this is what this fighting reveals. He says you got fighting without, frustration within, the root cause is selfishness, and he's going to tell us that our constant quarrels reveal that we've believed a lie, and just write the word hedonism. Hedonism is a worldview that promises that I'll be fulfilled by pleasure, and I will do what feels good no matter what the cost. It's the lie that sensual pleasures will fill my inner longings for fulfillment, significance, and happiness. As some have said, it's the desire to have possessions, the desire to feel pleasure, and the desire to be power. Sex, salary, and status drive us. And when sex, salary, and status drive us, our relationships crumble. Not only have we believed a lie, but we've betrayed a trust. See, that's what the world offers. That's the seduction. If you had this, if you look like this, if you own that, if you achieve this, if your kids go to this school, then you'll be a someone, then you'll be happy. It's the world system. And when we love the world, we betray our first love, Christ. And then finally, when that happens, unknowingly, naively, we actually shift positions in our relationship with God, and instead of being our Father who we're dependent on, who wants to bless and help us and give us the deepest joy. Jesus said, I came that you could have life and have it abundantly. He says we actually become an enemy of God. Is that crazy? Notice, where in the world do you get this, Chip? Look at verses 4 through 6. This is what he calls them. You adulterers. He's talking to a church. Don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God? I say it again. If you want to be a friend of the world, it's in the middle tense. You make yourself, it's a voluntary thing we do to ourselves. You make yourself an enemy of God. Do you think the scriptures have no meaning when they say that God is passionate? That the spirit he has placed within us should be faithful to him? You might circle that word passionate. The word literally is God is jealous. God is jealous about the spirit that he's placed within us. And then notice, and he gives grace generously, as the scriptures say. So grace is God giving us both the want to and the will to live our lives the way he wants us to, so that it honors him and really is for our good. And so notice it says, and his grace is generous. He's opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So my selfish pride is the problem in relationships with God and with others. But God is gracious. When it says he's opposed, right above that, A-N-T-I. That's the prefix on this word, anti. It means to be against. It's a picture in the Old Testament of God putting on holy armor and array to go against his enemies. When I am proud, when I'm in the me first mindset, my way, my stuff, my pleasure, my agenda, God literally says, I take on holy array and I'm against you. You've become my enemy. Now, I don't know about you, but that is serious stuff because he's jealous. He calls us adulterers. The Old Testament picture of Israel is they were wedded to God who gave birth to this great nation called Israel. And when they would worship idols and take their children and throw them into the fire, and when they get involved with the fertility guides and all manner of sexuality, and they begin to compromise, he called them, you're committing spiritual adultery. And James, being thoroughly Jewish, looking at this early church, seeing what his half-brother Jesus, the Son of God, fully man, fully God, died, rose from the dead. He says, he's our first love, and you're living as though the world system is going to deliver. Jesus said, I came that you could have life, have it abundantly. When you do that, here's what God does. You betray the trust. Some of us have, I think, completely missed the issue of sin. Sin, the word just literally means missing the mark. It's the picture of an archer and there's a target and you reach back and you let it go and it falls short of the target. Much of Christianity, quite honestly, has turned into behavior modification. And so the question that we tend to ask is how close to sin can I get without it doing damage or being really wrong? So if I'm dating someone, how far can we go? Or if it's about greed, well, how much can I have? And we miss the whole point. You might jot this little phrase down. Sin is always fundamentally a relational issue. It's not a behavioral issue. It's a relational issue.